I'm Jaimie Zaki, IBCLC and Mama 5, and this is the Breastfeeding with Confidence podcast, where pregnant and new mothers learn how to prepare for and overcome breastfeeding challenges without being controlled by stress, fear, and anxiety. Each week, we'll answer your questions, share breastfeeding success stories, and inspire you to shut out the toxic whispers of the world and embrace your God-given intuition to make confident breastfeeding decisions. Let's dive in. Hey, howdy, hey, Mama Bear. It's Jaimie Zaki, IBCLC. Welcome back to the Breastfeeding with Confidence podcast. I am so glad you are here today. And we are going to talk about the number one breastfeeding mistake that new moms are making. And the thing about this mistake is it starts in pregnancy. Can you guess what it is? I'll give you a second. No guesses? All right. It is how you are preparing for breastfeeding. I often talk to moms who are putting so much time and energy and effort into their birth plan, and then they slap breastfeeding onto it like it's just a box to check. This is so concerning because breastfeeding is so much more than a box to check, mama. You are going to be breastfeeding your baby. If breastfeeding goes the way you hope, and your goals are like most of my clients whose goals are 6 months, 12 months, 2 years beyond until baby weans themselves, then you're probably going to be breastfeeding longer than you were pregnant. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't be putting time and effort and energy into your birth plan. I'm just saying that you can't neglect breastfeeding and act like it's a box to be checked on your birth plan. Putting breastfeeding on your birth plan like it's a box to be checked is like it's giving breastfeeding this place of, oh, as long as we get a good first latch right away, baby latches right away, then we're fine. And it is so much more than that. It's so much more than that. I'm going to walk you through my confident mama bear framework to create your breastfeeding plan. And if you are not thinking about these things before your baby comes, you really need to. So you can go ahead and get a downloadable copy of this inside of my free Secrets to a First Latch Without Pain course, which is linked in the show notes, or you can find it on my website at littlebearlactation.com. But I'm gonna kinda walk you through it, and you're gonna go ahead and just you can think about it. You can grab out, a journal if you are somewhere you can write and write down your answers, or just, hold them in your heart and give them time and think about them. Let's get started. C. C is clarify your goals. What are your breastfeeding goals? Why is breastfeeding important to you? Do you plan to exclusively breastfeed? Combo feed? Do you just did you maybe have a really hard breastfeeding experience with your first and you want this one to be different? You need to know exactly what your goals are so that you can create a plan to achieve them. O is organize your support system. I could talk about organizing your support system all day. We could talk about support forever and ever. Amen. But I'm going to keep it short and sweet for you, okay? I want you to think about who is going to support you emotionally, physically, and logistically. I want you to consider the limited experience and training of some healthcare providers. Do you have an IBCLC on your team? Does your IBCLC answer to a doctor's office, a hospital system, or to you? Do you have family and friends that have had positive breastfeeding experiences? Do you have family and friends that have had really freaking hard breastfeeding experiences but overcame them? Those are the ones you want to talk to. Do you have family and friends who had really negative breastfeeding experiences? Keep them kind of quiet, away from you, and not somewhere where they will be interrupting your peace. If you are having challenges and need a little bit of encouragement. What about work? Do you have a support system at work? Do you have a back to work plan? What is your situation going to be at work with pumping? Can you maybe even bring baby with you? There are so many different scenarios of what back to work looks like that you need to know what that is as well. N, we are talking about N, navigating the hospital experience. Now, I am a home birth mama, but I have had two of my babies in the hospital. I know a lot of you are more naturally minded and may not be giving birth in the hospital, and that's okay. But there are still 98% of moms giving birth in the hospital, even if they are more naturally minded. So we are talking about navigating the hospital with breastfeeding because the hospital is a unique experience with breastfeeding, and you need to know how you will advocate for breastfeeding in the hospital. I hate to break it to you, but if you are going in assuming that your nurses are going to help you breastfeed, you're going to be disappointed. You may have a wonderful nurse. That doesn't mean she's going to have enough time to help you deal with all of your breastfeeding needs. You could have a really great, straightforward breastfeeding experience and you don't need anything. Or it could end up being really tricky to get started. And you need to know how to navigate pressure to start formula without necessity. You need to know your options for what to do if your baby can't latch. There's just so many different things that you need to know how to navigate. So, when you join my Latching with Confidence class and you get access to the Confident Mama Bear Society, one of the bonus workshops is actually called Avoiding Formula in the Hospital. And it's designed to help you learn how to navigate the hospital. I want you to sit down and think about what requests or questions you might have for staff. I want you to figure out, the situations where you're okay with formula, where you're not, what you plan to do if your baby has low blood sugar, your baby's having trouble gaining weight, you're having trouble latching your baby. Do you have a plan for these situations? Because these are the situations where your confidence might start to be shaken a little bit, and that's where you're gonna need to know what to do, need to know how to advocate for yourself if your support is not top notch, and kinda just know where to turn. Um, so just create a plan for that. If you don't have one already, you do need a plan. Most of the moms I work with went into the hospital thinking they were prepared to breastfeed and that their nurses would help them with any challenges, and their nurses threw them to the wolves. That is not to say every nurse is going to do that, guys. I try not to speak in absolutes here, but I do see trends, and I want you to be aware of those trends. These moms often end up so frustrated because they were trusting their nursing staff to help them breastfeed, and some of the advice that had been given just is so wrong. You just need to know how to kind of, um, know what passes the sniff test and what doesn't. Let's move on to F. F is first latch. Y'all, that first latch is so important. Y'all know how important it is. I'm going to do so many episodes on how important that first latch is, but what we're gonna talk about right now is what your plan is to ensure you get a good first latch. What steps are you going to take if the first latch is uncomfortable or painful? Do you know what to do? This is exactly why I have Latching with Confidence, which is an on demand class designed to walk you through navigating latching challenges confidently so that you can prevent and overcome unnecessary breastfeeding challenges, right? You need to know things like positions to hold your baby, latching techniques, what works, what doesn't. There's some advice that is given by most nurses that actually works against your baby. You want to know how to work with your baby for that first latch. This is where that breast crawl comes in. Letting your instincts and your baby's instinct take over is so important for getting that good first latch. And why the first latch matters so much. Mama, if you get a good first latch, you're going to feel like a million freaking bucks. Even if breastfeeding gets hard after that, you'll be like, oh, but we had that great first latch. And it's so special. If you have a horrible first latch and you really struggle, that's okay. That doesn't mean breastfeeding is not going to work, but it can make you feel really uneasy and worried and frustrated. And if it's a painful first latch or um, causes damage, nipple damage, now each feeding is going to be faced with a little bit of anxiety and fear. And now we're starting to set a really rough foundation. So we have to have a plan for how to optimize that first latch. All right, we are working through confident. We are about halfway there. We are on letter I. We are going to identify challenges ahead of time. What common challenges might arise? You should know what normal breastfeeding challenges are and how to handle them. I'm talking about things like that kind of initial soreness. I'm not talking pain. We're going to have so many episodes on pain and soreness, but I want you to know breastfeeding should not be painful, but sometimes there is an initial learning curve of discomfort. Other common challenges are things like engorgement, leaking milk. How will you address those things? Do you have any red flags for complex feeding challenges? Maybe you have a difficult medical history. Maybe you have a history of breast surgery. You had a reduction or augmentation. These things can impact breastfeeding. Maybe you notice that you haven't noticed many breast changes during your pregnancy. That's a red flag for possible challenges. Medical history like thyroid conditions, PCOS, diabetes, gestational diabetes, all of these things can have an impact on breastfeeding, and you should have a plan ahead of time for addressing them if you have a higher likelihood of facing those challenges. If you do have any of these challenges that I've mentioned and you're concerned they could have an impact on breastfeeding, please feel free to book a prenatal lactation consult with me where we can go over your medical history, address these concerns one on one, and create a personalized plan for overcoming them so that you know what to do and you're not blindsided. All right, let's get to letter D. We are talking develop a feeding routine. And developing a feeding routine is really, really, really important because a lot of people make a critical error, and it is that they schedule feed. Notice I said routine, not schedule. So I want you to think about what your baby's feeding schedule might look like, what you are expecting it to be like, and what is reasonable to expect, I guess. What is biological for a newborn? What does a feeding routine that they need look like versus what you have in mind? We need to start reconciling those two things now because for most of us, they are not the same thing. Most of us, we like a schedule, we like rigid structure, and that's not how newborns work. Newborns are not programmed the way we are. So, inside of my online breastfeeding classes and community, you can learn what is normal for a newborn and learn those basics of what to expect from their feeding cues to how often to feed and everything in between. Also, how are you going to monitor their intake? This is where a lot of anxiety comes from for new moms. They can't see the volume that their baby's getting. So you have to learn how to kind of navigate that, right? Understand what is normal, how to tell that your baby's getting enough milk without seeing necessarily those visual signs or those measurable signs and kind of going off of instinct and other signs that we do have. All of that is laid out inside of the breastfeeding classes that I offer. And we can go over it one on one if you want a prenatal consult to kind of dive into it all. Let's move on to E. We're almost to the end. You are sticking with me. Thank you so much. And we are going to talk about equipping yourself with tools. Now, this entire list has been about equipping yourself with knowledge, but what tools and resources are you going to have on hand? Do you need a nursing pillow? Do you need a lactation consultant? Wink, wink. Do you need a pump? Do you need a specifically sized pump? Which kind of pump do you need? Will you need bottles? Which bottles are best? Do you need a pacifier? Should you use a pacifier? You need to educate yourself on all of the tools that you need and don't need. And I will be addressing that deeper within this podcast, not this episode, but future episodes, because I know how important those questions are. And, is so much nuance to the answers, and there are so many options out there, it can be hard to decide. So, I'm going to teach you all of that in this podcast. So, if you haven't already, make sure you do subscribe so you are notified when new episodes come out and you can learn all of these good things. Let's move on to letter N. Mama, you need to nourish your body and your soul. During postpartum, you will need to nourish your body and your soul. First, nutrition. You need to prioritize rest and nutrition. I highly, highly, highly recommend creating a small meal plan ahead of time and creating freezer meals. Highly nutritious freezer meals. Many times we do freezer meals and we make casseroles, and come to find out these casseroles are loaded with like carbs and dairy. And I am not anti carbs or dairy by any means. However, I do not think that they are a sole source of nutrition, and you need a much more well-rounded nutrition for healing postpartum and for maintaining a healthy milk supply. I love egg casseroles, breakfast casseroles. Make a list for meal trains and have your friends and family sign up for meals, but don't just let them pick anything they wanna bring you. Give them a list, make suggestions. I highly recommend not forgetting breakfast. So breakfast casseroles, fruit salads, anything, smoothies, right? Like smoothie packs. You can make smoothie packs ahead of time, so you just have to drop them in. There are so many different things that you can do to make such a nourishing breakfast and start your day out well. Um, Nourishing soups for lunch are, are a huge recommendation. So soups are easy to reheat. At lunches, you need something easy and quick. You don't want to be making a whole meal in the middle of the day. Nourishing soups for lunch. Dinners, go with what you like, but make sure that you have a good, healthy, well-sourced meat and some type of vegetable in there. We want to make sure we are getting as many nutrients as we can. I love recommending the book Mother Food because it really talks about how all the different nutrition aspects of nutrition for new mothers and postpartum, what is important and what to focus on. Okay, we are making it to the end. We are almost there. You're going to track your progress. That's kind of a weird one, I know. But how are you going to monitor your breastfeeding journey and celebrate milestones? I want you to think about that. Are you going to only see success in achieving a year's worth of breastfeeding? I hope not. I want you to see success in each day. I want you to find a small way to celebrate each day. I want you to celebrate each week that you make it. I want you to take pictures and remember this part of your journey, even if it only lasts 3 days. I know you might be heartbroken, but having photos of that bond and that time is going to be so meaningful. Having photos of it sucking can be so meaningful when you look back one day. And maybe everybody's a little different on that. I am a former photographer. Photography is my hobby. I love it. I used to be a birth photographer, and I love photographing breastfeeding. So maybe that's just my way of celebrating it and keeping those little happy memories, but taking selfies, that's a great way to celebrate each day of breastfeeding that you make. Taking pictures of your milk when you pump and just being like, "Look how much I made." Things like that can be so encouraging, and celebrating our wins matters. It matters in everything, and it matters with breastfeeding. Also, how do you track, their intake? How do you track their diapers? What does that mean? How do you know when to make adjustments? You might need to make adjustments to your breastfeeding goals and your breastfeeding plan, and that's okay. How do you do that? How do you know? I want you to have a plan for that. So that is the Confident Mama Bear framework. And if you want a PDF of this, it is available inside of the Secrets to a First Latch Without Pain class, which you can link in the show notes, but you can also visit littlebearlactation.com. I'll give you the actual slug for it. Maybe it's littlebearlactation.com/secrets to a first latch without pain, landing with a dash between each word. So that's super annoying. So just go to littlebearlactation.com, click on pregnancy, and scroll to the bottom where you can start learning, and you will find the class there. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I hope this Confident Mama Bear framework helped you learn what you can do to not be unprepared for breastfeeding, to not assume it's all going to work out, and to not assume that your nurses are all just going to fix it for you. But I hope that you feel a little more confident now that there are things you can do to start learning, to start taking action, and to make a plan. All right, Mama Bear, that is a wrap for today. If this episode helped you feel a little more confident or a little more prepared for breastfeeding, can I ask you a quick favor? Go ahead and leave me a review. It helps other moms find this podcast and join us in this amazing community of fierce and confident mama bears. And hey, if you know a friend who could use some encouragement or real talk about pregnancy, breastfeeding, and all things motherhood, share this episode with her. You've got this, Mama Bear. Trust your instincts, stay fierce, and I'll catch you in the next episode.